The last few days, you've seen all of our coverage of the massive floods we've seen in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. They've claimed homes, they've taken people from us, but also concerns about the crops which have been damaged. Some parts of Northwest, some parts of KwaZulu-Natal, the Free State, bad damage to cabbage, avocado, sugarcane crops. Christo Van Der Rheede is the Executive Director at Agri SA. Christo, good afternoon to you. How bad has the damage been? Is it possible to actually assess it?
Good afternoon to you and all of your viewers. Yes, we are busy doing calculations and on terms of damage that we will be able to make available to the newspapers at a later stage. But yes, in some areas, significant damage. We have seen maize fields, also soya fields, and also damage to large-scale tomato plantings and potato plantings and so forth. And then the hail has caused tremendous damage to some of our avocado orchards and citrus orchards and so forth. Yes, on the one hand, we're very happy with the good rains because our groundwater is sort of being topped up after many years of drought. But at the same time, the crop damage is significant.
I mean, it's been quite a lot of rain. Almost no matter where you are in the country, there's been a lot of rain. Maybe not in Nelson Mandela Bay, but just about everywhere else. Have you seen a lot more rain over your crops than you've seen in the last few years? I mean, this comes after quite a good season for you last year.
Indeed. I've just received some figures today. For example, in the Free State alone, the total average rainfall is almost 150% higher than the prior year. And that amounts to approximately 73 millimeters of rain. And then, you know, the significant number that stood out for me is that it's almost 260% higher than the 35-year average. So, yes, we have had a serious drought in 2016, 2017, and since last year, very, very good rains. And hopefully we will be able to make good use of the moisture in times of drought, because we should be assured that we are going to have another drought cycle.
I mean, that's quite astonishing, that amount of rain, over 200% more than usual. There are also some locust swarms in the center of the country. Now, that can also be because of heavy rain. What kind of damage are they doing?
Not very significant. It's just quite an irritation. And there's a big debate about whether one should kill the locust with pesticide. We are very wary about that because it has spillover effect on other insects and on the entire ecosystem. Some people say we must use it as a protein source, and those are kind of ideas that that's not doing the rounds. But I think the most important thing is that locust is a pest because it eats the grass that is meant for cows and cattle, or cattle and sheep and other livestock. But luckily, with the help of the department, we could curb the further spread of the locust to especially provinces like the Free State, where people plant maize and so forth.
I mean, is it really possible to protect crops from locusts? You talk about pesticide. I suppose there's no other way to do it.
Yeah, and you need to spray it before it gets wings and start flying off. So, and the bigger problem, obviously, is in areas, desolated areas, where there's no monitoring of outbreaks. And by the time you realize there's a big swarm on its way, the locusts have developed wings and they start flying. And then once these swarms merge, then you've got a serious problem. Then you have really millions of these little creatures going down onto a crop field or a lucerne field, and it's devastating for that farmer.
So with all of this going on, and I realize there are always variables when it comes to farming and uncontrollable variables, rain being the main one, but we had a bumper crop sort of 18 months ago, a very good crop. We've had a lot of rain now, but we've had a lot of damage as well. Are you able to make any estimations? I know there'll be a crop estimates committee. They will, of course, meet and give their predictions. Are you able to make any predictions about what kind of crop, what kind of year farmers are having?
I must be honest, this is just a thumbsuck figure that is doing rounds. It's in the region of, say, 2 million tons that we stand to lose out of the 17 million tons that was estimated, earlier towards the end of last year. So it's not that significant. The big problem is obviously individual farmers that have lost more than 100% of their crops. Those farmers are in dire straits because remember, they have to pay back production loans. Before any production can take place, you have to go to the bank, you have to find money to buy fertilizer, to pay your workers, to buy diesel and so forth, and service your tractors. And if there's no income, what do you do as a farmer? Now, many farmers have crop insurance, but the bulk of our poorest farmers do not have. And so, yes, in areas such as KZN, your communal areas in like Free State, where there's also communal areas, and the Northwest, government has to really intervene to assist all of those farmers, regardless of whether they're big or small, with some kind of assistance.
When you talk about assistance, I mean, in the end, it usually boils down to money that farmers are going to need. Some of them will need quite a big amount.
Indeed. Remember, on the one hand, farmers are struggling with increasing input costs. We've seen a massive spike in the price of fertilizers, almost 50%, herbicides, pesticides. We've also seen a massive spike in the price of diesel, and now Eskom has proposed a 20.5% hike. So all of these increases in input costs makes it very difficult for our farming sector to remain viable and profitable. And we're going to see a number of farmers falling by the wayside due to the fact that they are no longer in a position to farm profitably. And this is where government has to come in and intervene and say, right, how do we unlock the potential of the phosphate mines on our doorsteps, like the Palabodwa mine where we mine phosphate? That's an important ingredient for fertilizer. How do we make sure that Eskom is optimized so that we bring down the cost of electricity? And what other sources, energy sources, can we unlock so that we bring down the cost of all of these inputs? Because in the end of the day, that poses a significant risk to the farming sector.
Let's not start talking about Eskom, Christo. I'm trying to be optimistic this year. If we have less food being produced as a result of this, I mean, we lose, 2 million tons. What impact is that going to have on food prices? And particularly maize, like petrol, has a multiplier effect on our economy. If the price of maize goes up, the price of chickens goes up.
Indeed, the spillover effect is significant. And the basic law of supply and demand kicks in. On the one hand, you have farmers that are really trying to produce food at an affordable rate, because farmers realize it's no use to produce food and people cannot afford it. On the other hand, you have your consumers already cash strapped, and they struggle because many of them have lost their jobs and so forth. And obviously your retailers in the middle are also trying to ensure that we supply consumers with affordable food. And that's the fine balance that we need to maintain. We have to keep a watchful eye over the inflation, food inflation rate. We have to keep an eye on the food price increases. Yes, we can import, but at the end of the day, we need to create more food on our own farms, so that in the process we create more jobs and we add more value to the rand. If we lose that advantage and we lose the competitive edge that goes with it, then as a country we're going to even experience more economic hardship.
Christo, I mean, there's no doubt about what's happening to our climate around climate change. And as an example of how we're all linked, the rain that we're seeing is because of a La Nina effect, which is directly linked to the temperature of the upper body of the Pacific Ocean. I mean, as far away from South Africa as you can get, has an impact on you as farmers. How worried are you about climate change in the future, particularly around rainfall? You've already said we can expect more droughts in the future, and I know of no scientists who will disagree with you.
Indeed. We are very concerned about climate change, and there's a big drive amongst our farmers to adopt new practices like regenerative farming, also other type of farming practices, making sure that we do not damage farmland and the soil, and we with all kinds of unnecessary fertilizers and so forth, and that we also apply the right type of methods when we plant maize, for example, and soya and so forth. Because soil is your sort of main ingredient, and together with it, water, to, at the end of the day, produce food. So yes, from our side, there will be a very big drive to ensure that all of our farmers adopt the latest best practices, and that we also do not contribute excessively to the release of carbon into the atmosphere, because all of these things cumulatively contribute towards climate change.
Christo Van Der Rheede, thanks very much indeed. Executive Director at Agri SA. Really do appreciate the time. Shows you how interconnected the world that we live in actually is. What happens in one part literally affects the price that you pay for bread and for chicken.